Cheers everyone, Warmick here and welcome to a new video on my channel. Today we'll be taking a look at the Elves of EO, including their history and where they are now, so if you enjoy the content make sure to leave a like, subscribe not to miss any future uploads, and let's dive into it. If some of you remember, in the previous lore video, which was about humans, I mentioned that humans are a regressed form of the Shapers. The same holds true for the Elves. When the dragons drove the Shapers away some good 40,000 years ago, the survivors ran away to hide, split into three groups. One of those three groups hid in the far south of Fiara beneath the thick treetops of Finon Mere. During the next tens of thousands of years, much like the humans, they started losing their Shaper essence, but due to their new surroundings being much more friendly than the one the humans found themselves in, they adapted rather quickly with both body and mind. Their bodies retained the pointy ears of the Shapers, but their structures slimmed down quite a bit, which allowed them to better traverse the thick forests. Unlike the humans, who were living barbaric lives until 1,000 years before the Convocation, the Elves quickly set up towns and villages deep within the forest. The thick foliage and massive trees protected them from the dragons, and they managed to quickly build up a new society for themselves, although be it all within the borders of Finon Mere. We don't know too much about this early society of the Elves. The only thing known to us is that they had 5 rulers, one of which was the elven queen Senvin, which we'll mention a bit later. Since they adapted to their new life rather quickly, they also retained the long lifespan of the Shapers. It's not clear whether or not they can reach the same age, but Elves can certainly live for upwards of 1,000 years, which is by far the longest of all the light races. Now, the next big event that happened for the Elves was the arrival of Arin, the Frostweaver. Keep in mind, all of this still happened thousands, if not tens of thousands of years before the humans drove away the dragons during the Age of the Sword. When Arin left his glacier to fly across Fiara in search of a being that would be equal to his power, he eventually set his sights to the south, where the Elves resided. The Elves couldn't think of a way to fight the dragon. After all, even the other great dragons feared his icy power, so Senvin, one of the aforementioned 5 rulers, decided to go and stand in his path so she could hopefully get him to spare her people. She succeeded, but for a price. Arin spared her folk and gave them the power of ice magic, but in turn Senvin had to return with him to his glacier and sing for him, because she was the only being who could resist his cold. This would eventually lead to some elves going to Tirganar to establish a new settlement there, but this didn't happen right after Senvin left. Considering the timeline and the fact that Tirganar used to be a dark elven city before the Ice Elves took over, it most likely happened around 600 BC or so, after the War of the Six Races. There were a few things that happened before that though. First, the elves called the Morhir, living in Dunmora. The Morhir are a group of castaway elves. They were unhappy with the goddess they worshipped, Ellen, and cursed her, and for that Ellen banished them into the swamp-ridden lands of Evermarsh, where they are supposed to repent while fighting off demons, which is what they've been doing for a very long time. It's never stated when they first got banished, but it's safe to assume that it's been a while, seeing as most of their spirits are more than broken the first time we visit Dunmora in SpellForce 2. The Morhir elves are also joined in an alliance with the humans of the Highmark, although this alliance later became one with the Shaikan living in the Westguard. And now we reach 1000 BC and the start of the Age of the Sword. Once the humans started taking over EO, the elves weren't too keen on it, and when the humans reached the borders of Finon Mere, the elves resisted being occupied and fought back, eventually managing to drive away the humans and gain a reputation as fierce fighters. These tense relations with the humans persisted until 750 BC and the War of the Six Races, when the elves allied themselves with the humans and the dwarves to drive away the Dark Ones. At the start of the war, the elves actually locked their borders in hopes of just sitting the whole thing out, but when it became apparent that the dark races would win if they just remained idle, they decided to join in. Since then, there haven't been any major conflicts between the races of the light. Once the War of the Six Races had ended, the elves decided to migrate outside of Finon Mere, and during the time of the Circle, one could find them all across Fiara. However, after the Convocation and the Convocation Wars, they became a rather rare sight outside of their original borders. The most notable big settlements of the elves outside of Finon Mere that still exist are Eloni in Northander and Tirganar, which we mentioned earlier. The elves never really migrated outside of Fiara. In terms of their culture and how they like to fight, the elves obviously rely on ranged combat and magic more than on close confrontations. They worship the light gods, but primarily their goddess Ellen, and they strive to coexist with nature on EO. And that's the general state of the Elven race today. Once again, if you enjoyed the video, let me know by liking and subscribing, it's always appreciated. And if you'd like to discuss today's topic, feel free to do so in the comments or on the official SpellForce Discord, the link to which will be in the description below. But that will be everything for now. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.